The slanderers say, Yuta's a fraud, Rika carries. The glazers say, well, no, he soloed. Which, I think they're missing the point. In fact, I think they're both missing the point. Yuta isn't a fraud, he's worse. Yuta is an underdeveloped character and doesn't fit within the philosophical landscape of JJK. As we know, Yuta stated his desire in life was to carry the burden of the monster, so to speak, as Gojo had carried it as well. However, the manner in which they approached the burden was drastically different. Gojo decided to live as a teacher and reform Jujutsu society from the inside and through the future. Yuta, contrastingly, suffered through the burden to protect his comrades, namely by using Gojo's corpse to defeat Sukuna. This selflessness is admirable, but admittedly inadequate to Gojo's values. As he once stated,
"Trying to win and risking death to win are completely different."
He then elaborates on the necessities of greed, imagining different outcomes as a possibility. Through this, Gojo identified the most prominent factor between Megami's stagnation at the time, which was the mental comfort of death over the risk of taking gambles. Arguably, the same occurred within Yuta's deeply rooted empathy. Instead of pondering a more viable solution, Yuta confined himself to a determined negative outcome. Yuta's sole objective was to protect, not live long enough to induce reform within Jujutsu society. Because of this short-sighted objective, he resorted to a subpar strategy just to obtain the comfort that his friends are protected. If he pressured the frontiers as Gojo had, he would have challenged his own ideals and a chance to entertain a broader interest, such as protecting the next generation or truly inheriting the burden of the monster as a revolutionary. Instead, he allowed stagnation within Jujutsu society. It would at least ensure the safety of his companions, being more of a restrained altruist compared to Gojo's individualism. And at some point within his empathy, Yuta ultimately becomes a marionette. For example, his promotion to the Gojo clan's patriarch. Did this not seem suspicious? Instead of crowning one that bears the Gojo genes as tradition honors, or one that lives in the Gojo clan's values, they crowned the second strongest, who was also 17 years old and a very distant cousin. It's obvious what this implies, that the Gojo higher-up's primary objective was not to establish a worthy head, but to maintain the authority they had when Gojo Satoru was the head, because they have the strongest in their arsenal. This reveals a broader truth about Yuta's position, a figurehead. Additionally, if the higher-up's intent was to claim the strongest as their so-called leader, Yuta's original objective, to handle Gojo's burden to protect others, lacks its sentimental weight. The burden would have been passed on to him anyway. It is not moral duty, but a responsibility. Even so, in this dilemma, the choice was his, whether to transform this perception or remain in the shadow of his given purpose. However, his behavior had a trend of lack of agency. Even relationally, his identity was relatively reactive. For example, his introduction to Jujutsu society started with Gojo naming his potential and offering him schooling in Jujutsu High. Granted, Yuta was heavily suicidal at the time, and expecting him to find a life purpose is unrealistic. However, even when he was assured the safety of the other Jujutsu High students, he was unable to conclude what exactly he valued. It was only the propulsion from Maki that he was able to become himself. Even Rika, the reason behind Yuta's self-blame, was supposed to free him so he could reform an identity that was not based on his curse. Yet even after that, Rika is at the forefront of every single one of his battles, redefining his identity once more to be based on Rika. The main character attributes that Yuta harbors are mainly from others, not himself. Even in the instances in which Yuta exercises agency, he lacks the depth the other characters have. Consider two other main characters, Megami and Yuji. Their ambitions twisted them in ways that Yuta did not experience. For example, Yuji's original goal, to help people, gradually delved into a burden, teaching him that it is inherently impossible to be a hero that saves everyone, and through that he brought a multitude of regrets. In Season 3, Yuji became shockingly aware about the identity he was forming, a cog, yet he accepted it because that was the only way he could protect at his level. Megumi's goal to save Sumiki grew into saving himself first. Throughout Season 1, Megumi's suicidal tendencies was known and apparent. It was not until he witnessed Yuji's growth that he realized he had to actually use his potential, not kill it. This is where he started implementing the risking death to win philosophy and raised from a depressed teen at his lowest point to using the 10 shadows to its maximum capacity and his own domain expansion in the span of about a year. Even Nobara's cause to meet Sayori in the big city caused her to literally die and relive in pursuit of this dream, even when she knew all she had was a memory of her. These were the choices the characters had chosen, which caused them to be twisted and complex in their own right. Yuta's ambitions allowed him to stay stagnant, and the problems he faced did not fundamentally change him as the other characters. While Yuta may seem a fraud, his real identity is proven. A mirror ball, showing the reflection of everyone else but his own. His greatest tragedy is that Yuta was never able to be his own character.